May 10th, 1969. Fire support base Stab, Tainan Province. The air doesn't move. It is 0530 hours, and the heat is already a physical weight. A squad from the 25th Infantry Division, the Tropic Lightning, is gearing up for a search and destroy patrol. They are the most technologically advanced soldiers on Earth. They are encased in modern gear. They have steel helmets. They have new flak jackets designed to stop shrapnel. They have M16A1 rifles, the fixed, space-age weapon, and M60 machine guns. They are a walking, talking display of American industrial power. In the briefing tent, their sergeant, a grizzled veteran on his second tour, taps a map. "All right, listen up. We're sweeping grid square 48. Intel says Charlie's been moving supplies. We're looking for weapons, rice, and any VC stupid enough to stick around. Watch for tripwires." A new private, a cherry, asks, "What about Punji steaks, Sarge?" The sergeant scoffs, and a few of the veterans laugh with him. "Son, you're wearing half-inch thick jungle boots with a steel plate in the sole. You got a flak jacket. You're worried about sticks?" He kicks his own boot. "This boot will stop a Punji. Your armor will stop a bullet. You are not a peasant. You are an American infantryman. You worry about the man with the AK-47. The rest is just a nuisance. Am I clear?" "Yes, Sergeant." The mockery is complete. The dismissal is total. The GIs are brutes. They are hunters. They are protected by technology. The Punji Trap is a primitive annoyance. It's a gnat to be brushed aside. 0700 hours. The jungle. 2 clicks from fire support base Stab. The patrol moves out. The suffocating green hell closes in. The 110-degree heat is trapped under the triple canopy jungle. The modern gear becomes a crucible. The flak jacket, designed to stop shrapnel, traps every ounce of body heat. The steel helmet is a 3-pound sweat bucket. Within an hour, the technological warriors are exhausted, soaked, and miserable. And then the crawl begins. The patrol slows from a walk to a shuffle to a dead crawl. The point man, the cherry who asked the question, is now on his hands and knees. He's not looking for the man with the AK-47. The jungle is empty. He is looking for the unseen. He is looking for a piece of fishing line, thin as a hair stretched across the path, a tripwire. Every step is a psychological calculation. Every vine is a wire. Every shadow is a ghost. The sergeant is right. The Punji Trap is not the main threat, but the fear of the primitive trap has slowed every single patrol to a crawl. The brute force of the U.S. Army, 30,000 men, has been neutralized by an invisible piece of string. The cherry, his eyes stinging with stinging sweat, is focused on the wires. His entire world is the 3-foot space in front of his face at waist height. He's not looking at the ground. He moves his foot forward, placing it carefully on what looks like a solid patch of leaves. Thwack! The sound is not an explosion. It is not the crack, crack, crack of an AK-47. It is a dull, wet, primitive sound. The cherry freezes. He does not scream. He looks down. His modern, steel-plated boot is fine. The trap did not hit his foot. He has stepped next to the trap, and his knee, as he knelt, has triggered a whipping bow trap. A single, fire-hardened, 12-inch bamboo spike has sprung from the side of the path and is now inside his thigh, just above the knee, having punched clean through his fatigues. He looks at it, confused. He feels no pain. Not yet. He tries to move. He can't. "Sarge," he whispers, his voice awed. "Oh God, Sarge, I'm caught." The patrol freezes. The mockery is over. The primitive stick has just achieved what no mortar or rocket could. It has inflicted pure psychological terror, and it has neutralized the entire patrol.
That same moment, the jungle floor. The sergeant is instantly at the Cherry's side. He hisses, his voice low and urgent. "Don't move. Don't move." The entire 10-man patrol is now frozen, paralyzed. They have become statues in the green hell. They are no longer a search and destroy unit. They are a rescue team, trapped in the open. The Cherry, his face white and slick with sweat, just stares at the 12-inch bamboo spike protruding from his leg. The pain is starting, a low, hot throb. "I can't feel my foot, Sarge." "You're fine," the sergeant lies. "Medic, get up here." The squad medic, his hands shaking, crawls forward. The patrol is now a perfect target. They are clustered, unmoving, in a known kill zone. They are focused on the gnat in their boot, completely blind to the brute that may be waiting. This is the true genius of the trap. It is not designed to kill the point man. It is designed to use him. It is a one-man ambush. The trap wounds one soldier, forcing the 9 others to stop, gather, and administer aid, creating a perfect stationary target for a mortar or a machine gun. The sergeant knows this. He can feel the psychological terror in the air, the unseen enemy watching. "Get him free, Doc," the sergeant whispers, scanning the silent tree line, his M16 raised. "Do it fast." The medic takes a K-bar knife. "This is gonna hurt, kid," he says. The Cherry nods, biting down on a piece of cloth. The medic has to cut the man's fatigues away from the wound, then brace his boot against the man's leg to pull the barbed spike back out of the muscle. The Cherry doesn't scream. He makes a low, choking sound. This single, primitive stick of bamboo has just inflicted more terror than a bullet. A bullet is clean. A bullet is relatively sterile. This spike is not. Every GI knew the horror story. The Viet Cong didn't just sharpen the stakes. They dipped them. They would coat the tips in filth, human excrement, snake venom, rotting meat. The trap wasn't just to wound. It was to infect. The medic, having pulled the spike free, pours the last of his own canteen water onto the deep, black puncture wound. It's bad, Sarge," the medic reports, his voice tight. "We gotta get him out. Now. He needs a dust-off." The sergeant gets on the radio. "Any station, this is Stab 6. I have 1 WIA, urgent. Requesting dust-off at grid." The Search and Destroy Patrol, the hammer of the U.S. Army, has been defeated. The mission is over. They are now just 10 men humping the boonies, trying to carry a wounded, screaming soldier back to an LZ, all because of a single sharpened stick. The mockery of the primitive weapon is dead. This one granite has just defeated the entire patrol.
At Fire Support Base Stab 180, 1800 hours, the dust-off helicopter descends into the red dust, its rotors beating the hot, thick air. The Cherry, his leg now heavily bandaged, is loaded on, his war over in less than a week. He is a casualty, but he is not just a statistic. He is a psychological weapon. The rest of the patrol sits in the mess tent silent. They are not eating. They are staring at their boots. The mockery from the morning briefing is gone. It has been replaced by a cold, terrified confusion. This confusion is the real objective of the primitive trap. The GIs in their sterile headquarters were analyzing the wrong war. They measured victory in body counts and objectives taken. The Viet Cong were fighting a different war. They were fighting a war of psychology. The Punji Trap was not a weapon designed to kill an army. It was a tool designed to stop one. The horror was not in the wound. It was the idea of the wound. The GIs didn't know the technical details. They didn't know that the sappers had crude workshops where they would spend weeks fire-hardening bamboo stakes. They didn't know that the filth they were dipped in was a calculated biological agent designed to cause infection and septicemia, ensuring that a simple puncture wound would neutralize a soldier for months. They didn't know the sheer variety of the unseen threat. There wasn't just one kind of trap. There was the whipping trap, the one-man ambush that had hit the cherry. There was the Punji stake pit, a simple hole in the ground, camouflaged with leaves, filled with a dozen stakes pointing up, designed to impale a GI's steel-plated boot. There was the side-closing trap, two walls of spikes that would slam inward, crushing a man's leg. And there was the ball trap, a massive spiked ball of mud and wood, tethered to a tripwire that would swing down from a tree at head level. To the brute American army, this was primitive, peasants' warfare. It was not honorable. To the Viet Cong, it was brilliantly effective. It was a war of the gnat. A single B-52 bomber strike cost $50,000. A single Punji Trap, made from a free piece of bamboo and human filth, could neutralize a $50,000 American soldier, cost $100,000 in medical evacuation, and paralyze his entire 10-man squad with psychological terror. The mockery was now absolute. The high-tech sledgehammer was being systematically dismantled by the fear of the unseen. The GIs had laughed at the sticks. Now they couldn't believe they were terrified of them.
Late 1969. The Pentagon East. MACV Headquarters, Saigon. The mockery was not just dead, it was a source of humiliation. The brute U.S. Army was now paralyzed by the gnat. The official story declared victory, but the real war was being told in hospital wards and psychiatric reports. The Punji Trap had become a psychological weapon of catastrophic proportions. It was not about the kill. It was about the fear. Commanders in their sterile headquarters couldn't believe the data. The M16 and AK-47 were responsible for the majority of deaths, but the primitive booby traps, the Punji stakes, the tripwires, the bouncing betties were responsible for an impossible, disproportionate number of wounds. This was the brilliant Vietnamese strategy. A dead GI was a tragedy, but he was a single statistic. A wounded GI was a logistical nightmare. The one-man ambush was a catastrophic reversal. The cherry who stepped on the primitive stake had neutralized 10 men. It took 2 men to carry him. It took 6 more men to provide security for the carriers. It took a multi-million-dollar dust-off helicopter to fly him out. It took a team of surgeons and months of antibiotics to save his infected leg. The Viet Cong had defeated an entire American platoon and cost the U.S. Army $250,000, with a tool that cost nothing. It was a war of 1,000 cuts, and the brute American giant was bleeding to death. The psychological terror was even worse. The fear of the unseen destroyed morale. It slowed every single patrol to a crawl. A search and destroy mission that should have taken 2 hours now took 2 days. The GIs, who had laughed at the sticks, were now terrified of the ground itself. They were paralyzed by the fear of shadows. They were so focused on not stepping on a trap that they were not looking up for the man with the AK-47 who was waiting for them. The Punji Trap was not the weapon. It was the bait. This was the reversal. The high-tech sledgehammer army with its B-52s and artillery was helpless. Their armor couldn't stop an infection. Their modern guns couldn't shoot a shadow. The mockery of the primitive gnat was over. The GIs had realized that the sticks in the mud were more devastating than artillery.
Early 1970, MAC SHQ, Saigon. The ICORD report had exposed the M16, but the Punji Trap was exposed in a different report, the daily casualty logs. The war of 1,000 cuts was bleeding the U.S. Army dry. The arrogance of the high-tech brute was dead. The commanders, stunned and humiliated, were forced to adapt. Their billion-dollar war machine had been defeated by a 19th-century weapon. Their solution was not more technology, it was less. The U.S. Army was forced to relearn a primitive truth: nothing beats the low-tech tools of a hunter. The invincible fortress of the steel-plated jungle boot was not enough. A new kind of soldier was born from this terror: the combat engineer. But his primary tool was not a D9 bulldozer, it was a sentry dog. The Army realized that the most advanced sensor on the battlefield was not a starlight scope, it was the low-tech nose of a German shepherd. Patrols which had once mocked the primitive jungle now crawled behind a dog. The dog could smell the tripwire. It could smell the buried spike. It could smell the filth they were dipped in. The modern army was now following an animal to survive a stick. The crawl itself became a brutal doctrine. The point man, no longer a cherry walking upright, was now a hunched, paranoid hunter. He carried a 12-gauge shotgun to blast the jungle floor, and he carried a machete to feel for the wires. This was the reversal. The primitive trap had forced the high-tech GI to abandon his modern tactics and become primitive himself. The mockery was gone. The laughter was dead. The GIs who had dismissed the sticks were now obsessively studying them. They learned the 10 different ways to spot a Punji. The arrogance was systematically beaten out of them. The psychological terror was now institutionalized. The fear of the unseen was now official doctrine.
Late 1970, the American home front. The war of 1,000 cuts was not just happening in the jungle, it was happening in the living rooms of America. The horror of the Punji Trap was not just the physical wound, it was the psychological wound it inflicted on the entire American war effort. The mockery of the primitive stick had been lethally reversed. The GIs who had laughed at the gnat were now the ones being psychologically devastated. This is the core emotion. This is the why. Psychological warfare can be more devastating than technological warfare, the fear of the unseen. The U.S. had built an army of brutes, an army of high-tech sledgehammers designed to fight a visible technological battlefield. They were prepared to fight tanks, they were prepared to fight artillery, they were prepared to fight an enemy they could see. The Vietnamese, with their crude tools, refused to fight that war. They weaponized the jungle itself. They weaponized fear. The Punji Trap was the perfect psychological weapon. It was not designed to kill, it was designed to maim. It was brilliant in its brutality. The high-tech American brute could survive a clean bullet wound, but he couldn't believe the horror of the infected Punji steak. The fear of the unseen, of infection, of septicemia, and of being left behind, this was the real terror. The primitive stick inflicted a wound that no flak jacket or steel-plated boot could stop. It wounded the mind. The mockery was complete. The arrogant technological giant was now terrified of shadows. He was reduced to crawling on his belly, following a dog just to survive a stick. The lesson of the hammer was brutal. In the crucible of combat, the simplest tool is often the best. And a weapon that defeats the enemy's mind is the ultimate weapon of all.